for the presentation. So hi, everyone. I'm Linda Graham with the City of Palo Alto. I manage our water conservation program, and I'm excited to have you here. Next slide. So I know, just go over a couple of Zoom logistics. As you can see, all attendees are muted by default. We will be pausing periodically for questions. If you can put your question into the Q&A, that will work really well. And then at the end of the presentation, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you so you can ask Chris your question directly. And this webinar is being recorded and will be made available. So here at the City of Palo Alto, we partner with BOSCA. So BOSCA represents 26 agencies that include cities, water districts, a water company, and a university, all that purchase water from San Francisco. The BOSCA member agencies provide water to 1.8 million people and over 40,000 businesses. BOSCA's goal is a high quality supply of water at a fair price. So the part of the reason of why we hold these landscape workshops is that there's just so much room to improve efficiency and conservation outdoors. Outdoor water use reduction through the use of water efficient plants and innovative techniques can really help ensure that future water supplies needs of our communities are met. So if you live here in Palo Alto, we partner with Valley Water on several rebate programs. As you'll learn about tonight, we have a rain garden rebate of $2 per square foot of roof area diverted. We also have a landscape conversion rebate of up to $4 per square foot of lawn replaced with drought tolerant plants. And then there is a laundry gray water system rebate where you can get up to $400 for diverting your laundry water to the landscape. For more information, go to cityofpaloalto.org/ways to save. And now Pam is going to explain some of our additional stormwater rebates.
Hi, everyone. We have, in addition to our team in environmental services providing rebates to rain gardens, we also provide rebates for rain barrels and cisterns. They both capture rain or roof runoff. The difference is that rain barrels tend to be much smaller. They are easier to maintain and to set up. So a lot of residents feel comfortable setting those up. Cisterns, you typically need some maybe help from a contractor. They can be installed above ground or underground. You can see in the picture in the middle that that's an above ground cistern, but a lot of times people don't have that room. So it sometimes is maybe installed underground in a yard or under a garden. For rain barrels, we provide a rebate in partnership with Valley Water for up to a total of $70 a barrel. For cisterns, it's up to $1 a gallon. And then third, it's a bit of a different rebate, but if you are interested in installing permeable pavement in your sidewalks, patio, driveway, you can receive a rebate of $1.50 per square foot. This is for permeable asphalt, permeable concrete, and permeable pavers. They do have to be installed in a particular way to allow infiltration. So you can go to our website through the link at the bottom and find out more information and contact us with any questions. Thank you.
Great. One last resource that we have here in Palo Alto is that we recently launched WaterSmart. This is an online portal where you can log in and see your monthly water use, get recommendations based off your water use patterns for different rebates and actions that you can take to save water. Definitely log on and see how you're doing. In addition, we have for free mulch from Hopkins Tennis Court in Mitchell Park. And we also have a compost giveaway station at Eleanor Party Community Garden. So you'll be learning a little bit about the benefits of mulch and compost for your garden. So just want to know that that is available to you. And for all of the Palo Alto resources, our website is the cityofpalo.org/ways to save. So if you don't live in Palo Alto, but you're part of a BOSCA member agency, BOSCA partners with several cities on similar rebates. So there's rebates of $1 to $4 per square foot for converting your lawn to drought tolerant plants, and $200 rebate for rain barrels. In addition, BOSCA has a smart controller rebate and installation program and a rain garden rebate as well, which can be rebated up to $300. To figure out what your city provides and partners with BOSCA, you can go to bayareaconservation.org, look up utility, and see what is available to you. As I mentioned, we partner with Valley Water, and they have a lot of great videos and resources online to give information of how to check your irrigation system, top tips for watering a landscape, etc. So if you go to watersavings.org, there's a lot of great videos and tutorials. And in addition, southbaygreengardens.org has great landscape maps and ideas and designs for you to review. This is our last landscape workshop of the season. So thank you if you've enjoyed it, if you've come to any of our other classes. And we will be holding classes again in the fall. But we also just wanted to give a plug for our Municipal Services Center open house, which is happening on Saturday, July 15th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the MSC building. You're going to be able to come and learn all about the different departments in the city, all the resources and rebates available to you, and also see some of our cool utility equipment. There'll be ice cream, food trucks. It'll be a great event. So hope you're able to join us in person for that. For more resources, you can go to bayareagardening.org. And then now I am going to introduce our instructor. So we are super excited to have Chris Corvetti with us. Chris moved to California upon completion of her 2-year Peace Corps service in Mongolia, where she first experienced water scarcity. As a member of the Watershed Stewards AmeriCorps program, Chris delved into issues surrounding water conservation specific to the Bay Area. Since the end of her AmeriCorps service, Chris has worked with numerous local nonprofits and municipalities to install rainwater harvesting systems throughout the Bay Area. Chris, take it away from here.
Thank you, Linda and Pam. So we're gonna talk a little bit about rain gardens today, which is super exciting. So this is a picture of, you guessed it, a rain garden. This one is in Palo Alto at Hoover Park, and it's a great example of a rain garden. You will notice that there's a drainage grate in the center for overflow, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we get into this a little bit more. This garden's planted with all natives, so it's pretty exciting. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of a rain garden and how they can help out your landscaping around your home or landscaping in our communities. A lot of the benefits are very straightforward, and because you're here joining us, you probably already know most of what's on this slide. But rain gardens are great because they capture and filter runoff from impervious surfaces, and then they help use that water to recharge the local groundwater. Especially if you use native plants, you're going to have much reduced irrigation needs. It's going to support wildlife habitat, and it's going to reduce flooding, overflows, sewer overflows, and erosion around your property. It's, for that reason, can also increase your property value. It'll enhance the landscape, and it helps keep our creeks cleaner because it is capturing that runoff and reducing the amount of polluted runoff that can make it into our creeks. So we'll have healthier habitat for our fish as well as our land animals that can use this. The picture on the left is a native rain garden at Bull Park in Palo Alto. It's actually capturing all of its water from the adjacent bike path, as well as a hillside that was previously grass covered but had an issue of sliding and running into that bike path. So this created a great relationship with the bike path where we were able to reduce the flooding as well as provide some native habitat for some of our local insects and butterflies. So what makes a rain garden different? How is a rain garden different than any other garden or landscaping that you might install at your house? This is kind of the big question and why we're all here tonight. So I figured we'd get it out of the way first. Rain gardens are different because compared to a conventional lawn, rain gardens allow for 30% or more of the water to actually soak in the ground. And this is a national percentage, but I actually think it's higher in the Bay Area because of our type of soil. And because we get a flashiness of our storms where in the beginning our soil can't absorb the rains until it starts to get soaked, and then our soil often gets so saturated that we then get even more runoff, or we see a lot of mudslides. So I believe that this percentage is higher, but I have not seen a study specific to this area. Rain gardens are designed to help mitigate these flashiness and flood conditions because they capture, store the water, and then you have that water infiltrate into the ground later. Typically, they're designed with the native soil actually being removed or amended, which is very different than a standard garden you would install around your house, where you would just plant your plants at ground level, maybe add a little bit of compost just to make it a little healthier, but you wouldn't actually dig out for a normal garden. With rain gardens, we actually dig it out, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Native plants are a great resource for rain gardens here in California, and especially in the Bay Area, because with our climate, we get very heavy storms all at once. We get a lot of storms in the winter, and we have a lot of dry time in the summer. And a lot of plants aren't really as adapted to being wet in the winter and dry in the summer, or being soaked to the point of flooding for part of the year and then totally dry. But our native plants have adapted to that. So native plants are a great way to make your rain garden more resilient. Rain gardens are designed to pond temporarily, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means. But the basic idea is they're dry most of the time. This is not a pond feature. When I say ponding, this is a temporary ponding where it will fill with water after a heavy rainstorm, but all that water will soak into the ground. So let's take a look at how that works. So the anatomy of a traditional rain garden, and there are different ways to do a rain garden, which we're going to talk a little bit about some other layouts you can have, but this is a traditional rain garden. You dig out anywhere from 12 inches to 2 feet deep. You would dig it out. For shallower ones, maybe 8 inches. And you would layer in your layers. So on the bottom, you would put a drainage rock or a really sandy soil, something that is going to really allow that water to infiltrate into the ground. I generally use drainage rock because it can't compact. And so you're always going to have that airspace for the water to fill into and be able to fill up while it has time to infiltrate. In the middle, you'll have a bioswale soil. So I'm going to draw this on here. So we had our first layer on the bottom was that drain rock. And you'll do anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of drain rock. That is a 6, sorry about that. In the middle, you'll have bioswale soil, or depending on what type of soil you have, it may be amended soil that came out. So you can amend your natural soil with some compost and some sand to make it a little bit more permeable. We're going to talk about testing your soil a little later on to see what type of soil you have and how well it'll work for a rain garden. And again, you're going to have about 3 to 6 inches here. So our top layer in this image is river rocks. And this shows it during a storm where the rain's coming in and you can see the water because it's temporarily ponded. But some of the pictures we looked at earlier and in the next slide, we'll look at some when they're wet and dry. So river rocks are a great option for your top layer here in the Bay Area because they'll hold everything in place, but they'll also provide spacing for the water to pond. You can also use mulch. In this picture, we have mulch on the raised berms rather than in the swale itself. This is generally my preference because some mulch will float, and you generally have to replace the mulch more often because it also will add to your bioswale soil by breaking down over time, and you'll have to keep refreshing it, whereas the river rocks generally last a little bit longer. The downside to the river rocks is as your if your bioswale soil has a lot of compost in it, that will break down a little bit, and you may notice some sinking where you want to take the river rocks out and amend the soil after quite a few years. So there's pluses and minuses to either mulch or river rocks, and it's really based on your own garden design. The river rocks definitely makes it very obvious that you have a feature there, whereas the mulch, you can make your rain garden absolutely blend in with your rest of your landscaping so that you know where you dug out, but maybe the casual observer might not. So there are ways to blend this into your landscaping. So in the picture here, you can see the direction of the water. So we have our water coming off of sidewalks, driveways, parking lots, roofs for this rebate. For rebate purposes, we are looking at the square footage of your roof that is going to be calculated for the rebate. But if you have an area that often floods at the bottom of a hill on your property, or if you're putting in a rain barrel and you want somewhere to connect the overflow, these are great options for a rain garden as well. So you can see the flow of the water coming down in this picture, and then it soaks through our 3 layers and is able to slowly infiltrate the ground. Now, this also slows pollution as well, because generally when we get a big rainstorm in the Bay Area, the water will get washed down our hardscapes. It will overflow if our soil is still too dry to absorb the water, or if it's already too saturated to absorb the water, and it will flow into our roads and down into our storm drains and straight into our creeks. When we get a flash during a rainstorm, when we get that flashiness of the water, we get pollutants and other things that are on the road get carried into our storm drains and into our creeks. So by slowing this water down and letting it spread out into our rain garden, sink into the soil, those pollutants get trapped, and we don't have as much water going out to the roads to carry the pollutants into our storm drains. So it helps filter the water and create a cleaner habitat and a cleaner ecosystem around our homes and our businesses. These rain gardens we're going to talk about in much more detail rather than just this anatomy page, but I want to talk a little bit about how much rain we get in the Bay Area, because I get a lot of questions when I'm doing these presentations, both for rain gardens and rain barrels, of is there actually enough rain? We live in the Bay Area. We've been in a drought for years. We don't get rain for months at a time. Is there really enough rain to make it worth digging out my landscaping, digging down 12 inches, amending my soil, and creating this rain garden? Is it worth it? So we're going to look at some numbers. And if you look in the pictures on the right, this is, I believe, also in Palo Alto, but I didn't put the address on here. But this is in between a road and a parking lot. So this drains from both the road as well as the parking lot. And you can see during the dry season in the top picture how it just kind of looks like a landscape feature, nothing special. But in the bottom picture, during a rainstorm, it actually floods. All that water is gone within 2 days. It soaks into the ground, but this allows it to sit there during the rain and then soak in. So the big numbers we're looking at is, if we think about 1,000 square foot area, in 1 inch of rain, it can capture over 600 gallons of water. So we have this nice equation we can look at to figure out how that applies to us. So an average rain event here in the Bay Area is more like 1/2 inch although lately we've been getting 7 inches at a time here and there. So we definitely do get a wide range per rainfall. But we're gonna say the average is a 1/2 inch. So with a 1/2 inch amount of rain, 1,000 square foot roof can capture 310 gallons of water. And then if we look at the annual average of rain per year in Palo Alto, that's 17 inches. So that 1,000 square foot roof is shedding over 10,000 gallons of water over the course of the year. Now, we are in Palo Alto. We don't get a lot of rain. The national US average of precipitation is 38 inches. So we are, you know, less than half of that. We're right in the half of that range, which seems like not a lot of water, but when you put it in these terms, 10,000 gallons on a 1,000 square foot roof is a lot of water. And a lot of that goes into our storm drains and carries those pollutants with it. So this is a great way to slow it down, spread it out, and sink it down to recharge our groundwater. I'm going to keep moving, but if you do have any questions, go ahead and type them into the Q&A as we go along, and we will answer them as they come up on the slides. So we talked a little bit about determining our soil type and determining our soil infiltration rate. So these are like big words. It sounds complicated, and I just want to make it sound really easy. This is something you can easily do in your backyard. So if you want to figure out how fast the water is going to infiltrate into the ground, and you want to see how effective a rain garden is going to be, you can dig a 6-inch deep hole with a relatively flat bottom, something like 4-inch by 4-inch, just enough to get your arm in there really nicely. I always place something flat across the top so I can measure from the middle of the hole. Fill the hole up, pour water into it, and have your stopwatch ready, because as soon as that hole is full, start timing it, measuring then every couple of inches. If it looks like it's gone down a couple of inches, see how long it took to do that. You can put a measuring tape into the hole and mark where it is after each hour if it's going really slowly. Or if it's like my yard, which drains very, very fast, you can just do a stopwatch till it's empty and then mark how many inches deep your hole was to get this calculation. If you are trying to really learn about your backyard and learn about your soil, it's really great to know any observations when you're digging the hole. Was the hole really difficult to dig? Was the soil really compacted? Were you doing this when your soil was totally dry and parched? Or was your soil already pretty wet? When you're digging your hole, did you find water in there? Because if you're in the dry season and you're digging down and you're finding water, then you are at the water table, and this is not going to be a great location for a rain garden. But with some homes, you can move 10 feet over on the property and not have that same issue. So you can take a look to learn a little bit about your own backyard. So we also want to talk about figuring out what type of soil we have, because if you have a really, really clay soil, a highly clay soil is really just not going to be suitable for a rain garden, because the water's never going to fully absorb. But when you're digging this hole, when you're about 4 to 6 inches down the hole, get about 2 teaspoons of soil, knead it in your palm, add a little water to it until it's moldable like putty, and form it into a solid ball. Then squeeze that ball between your thumb and forefinger, and as you're gently squeezing it, let it make what we call a ribbon, so like a little flat piece that's coming straight up, and it's going to work its way upward out of your hand, and you just want to see what happens. If it is just falling apart in your hand, then you already have really sandy soil. So you're not going to need to add a lot of amendment to that soil to put it back in for your rain garden. You're still going to have to dig it out, but you won't have to add as much amendment for your soil. If it is less than an inch long when it breaks, that's pretty silty soil. Again, you'll still need some amendment, but you won't need as much. Once you get into the 1 to 2 inch long ribbons of soil, that's got a lot more clay in it. So we're talking about, rather than just amending the soil, maybe just replacing the soil that's in, or adding very little of our natural soil back into our rain garden. And if that just keeps going and makes a really long ribbon, more than 2 inches, that means you've got really highly clay soil, and it's just not going to absorb the water as well. And I would recommend looking at a different site on your property to see if maybe there's a better location for your rain garden that's going to be able to absorb a little bit better. Okay, any questions about soil or water infiltration?
I don't see any questions.
Okay, then I'm going to move on to talk about roof types. So one of the things we want to think about when we're installing any rainwater harvesting barrels or gardens is what type of roof we have. Most roofs are going to be totally great and your plants are going to do fine. The ones that you want to think about is if you have a galvanized or an untreated metal roof, which is more common for sheds or industrial buildings, that they're gonna rust, and you're gonna get different metal oxides into your soil that is not going to be beneficial for your plants. So you just want to think about the health of your plants. The other thing you want to think about is if you have wood or cedar shake shingles, so like the thick shakes, or there are some newer shingles that are a little thinner, if they are treated, so if they're being treated regularly with an herbicide or a pesticide, I've had people say, well, how would I know? And my answer is always the same. If you're paying someone to go up there and treat your roof once a year, don't hook it up to a rainwater harvesting system, because all of those pesticides and herbicides are going to get concentrated in your garden and your plants aren't going to want to grow there. If it's untreated, then you're all set. With cedar shingles, you do want to keep in mind that certain plants don't like the oil from the cedar, and that can affect what will grow nicer in your garden, but it's not actually harmful to the garden. Just like certain plants won't grow underneath an oak tree or underneath a redwood tree because they don't like the duff that's underneath those. So cedar has a very strong oil that does come through a little bit, even from the roof, even with the short contact the water has with the roof. But generally, those are the only two types of roofs you want to think about not connecting to. Solar panels or solar shingles are great. If you have a new installation of asphalt shingles or new solar panels, check with the manufacturer to find out if there's anything on there that is going to off gas or have anything come off. Usually anything like that would be completely clear of the roof within about a month or a couple of rainfalls. So you can disconnect the system, run a bypass line to kind of not pool in your garden for those first months of a new system like that. But you can talk to the manufacturers. Okay, so since we're talking about roofs, let's talk about sizing your rain garden. So these are the recommendations from Valley Water on the size of your rain garden based on the roof area that you're measuring for your rebate. So if you are going to divert from 2 separate downspouts, you would measure the entire roof area going to both downspouts. If you were, however, only going to do your garden from, say, one downspout like this one in the bottom left, you would measure just the roof area that is connected to that one downspout. So if you have multiple downspouts that can be tied into the same rain garden, that's a great way to be able to better use the resources of that roof in filling that rain garden. This chart is available on the Palo Alto, City of Palo Alto website, as well as the Valley Water website. So you'll be able to get it. You don't need to frantically write it down right now. It is accessible. This is also going to tie into permits. So a lot of people always ask me, do I need a permit to do this? I'm digging out my landscaping to make this happen. Do I need a permit? And for most cases, the answer is no. But if you are going to be doing such a large garden that you are moving more than 100 cubic yards of soil, you're going to need a grading permit, and you got to reach out to the City of Palo Alto to get that permit. That is really not common, especially for residential rain gardens. That would just be a huge amount of soil to pull out. Linda also just posted the rebate page for City of Palo Alto in the chat, so you guys can click on that and save it in your web browser to look at later. I believe Linda's also going to be sending out an email with some links at the end of tomorrow or in the near future. Okay, so these are just the recommended garden sizes depending on your roof area that you are diverting. These are recommendations. It will be a little different depending on what type of soil you have and how deep you plan on creating your rain garden. Let's talk a little bit about planning where to place your rain garden. So a lot of these you're going to think are just very common sense, but we're going to go over them anyway. You want to be at least 10 feet away from the foundation of your home. If it's an option, possibly downhill from your home. The goal is not to have any of this water come back into your foundation. We really want to bring that water away from your home. We also want to be at least 5 feet away from a property line, or at least 3 feet away from a sidewalk or road. So as delightful as it might sound to flood your neighbor's lawn, it's not an option. All of this water that we're capturing has to sink in on your own property. We want to make sure that these gardens are sized appropriately and all that water has the ability to sink in on your own property. Make sure you call 811 first, check for buried utilities. You want to be at least 5 feet horizontally and 1 foot vertically away from any utilities. Do not build over septic systems if you have a septic system. You want to avoid really large tree roots. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, I don't have a flat spot on my property. I live in the Bay Area. Everything's hills. I have a really steep hill. That's okay. You can dig out the soil from part of the hillside and use your native soil to create a berm downhill to get this graded cut, just like this picture here in the bottom right. So there are ways that you can work with the landscape and with your property the way it is to fit within these requirements. So let's talk a little bit more about the rebate requirements. This is just the base requirements. Please do look at the Palo Alto website for more details. But these are the most straightforward basic requirements. We already talked about 10 feet from the foundation. You do want some erosion protection, especially at the inlet, where the water is going to come in the fastest. Sometimes also at the overflow, you want some erosion protection. And this is where if you decide to do the mulch on the top of your swale, you would maybe want to put some river rocks at the inflow and the overflow points just to protect the shape of your swale. You need to have at least a 6 to 12 inch ponding depth so that it's able to hold that water when the ground's totally saturated and soak in later. For the rebate, they do want you to use native plants. Bosqua has an amazing plant list. It is a downloadable Excel sheet, and it lists all the plants that they recommend. You can search by whether or not they're native. You can search by where they should be planted, and you will be able to see exactly what's going to work for your rain garden. My next slide just has, you know, a couple recommendations on ones that I've had really good luck with in the Bay Area. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. The depth of your garden needs to be at least 12 inches, going down to 24 inches deep, with a predominantly flat bottom. So that's where our last slide comes in. If you're on a slope, you can see we got that flat bottom at the bottom of the garden. And this one says 6 inches, but what it actually means is 12 to 24 inches. You can use sloped or vertical walls in your rain garden design. If you're doing mulch and dirt, the sloped walls are a little bit more beneficial. It's a little easier to keep it contained. If you're going to be lining with river rock, you can do a vertical slope, because that will help contain your berm. And we've already talked about the berm. So we're going to move on. Let's talk a little bit about plants. Again, the Bosqua website has that downloadable Excel sheet or PDF that is super, super useful. But here are a couple ones that I really recommend. They just work great. Common Russia Juncus is a really wonderful plant for the swale. It just can handle the flooding really, really well. And after it's established, it stays very healthy in the dry season. All of these other ones in the swale section have those same properties. Ones like blue-eyed grass or California fuchsia or coyote man bee plant or the poppy, those are great plants to plant right on the berm right next to the rain garden. They don't really like to be flooded. But they are quite happy getting their roots kind of in where they get a little bit of that extra water, and then they're good dry for the rest of the year. Some of these other ones in that third column are pretty happy on either one. They could take it or leave it with the extra water, but they'll do okay. Again, I really recommend checking out that website, because they just have hundreds of plants on there, and it's a really great resource. Okay, so this is where everyone always asks me. This is great. You're listing native plants, but I really want a vegetable garden. Can I put edible plants in my rain garden? The short answer is no. You're not going to put edible plants in the swale. But if you are like, I am giving space in my garden for this rain garden, I really want some space for edible plants, you can put them just outside of your rain garden on the berm. But you really want to avoid anything that's going to be growing on the ground, like these strawberries in this picture on the right. You want to stick with the taller, the viney veggies, the bushy berries like blueberry, blackberry, raspberry, or the tall, like bushy herbs and veggies that are going to grow a little bit higher, or things like citrus or stone trees. So really just thinking about what you're placing. You don't want anything that's going to be growing on the ground or in the ground. You definitely don't want any root vegetables right next to your rain garden. And this list is also really good if you have a rain barrel and you want to be able to water edible plants. You want to be able to drip irrigate edible plants from your rain garden, from your rain barrel. This list is also very good for that. So again, not for the rain garden itself, but if you're very much wanting some veggies close to it, just on the outside, you're fine. So this is a great question that just popped up, is about maintaining your garden during the dry season. And this is actually my last slide, so we will take questions after this. So maintaining your garden during the dry months, it is really useful to have drip irrigation set up in your garden. And before anyone points it out, I understand that those are pepper plants in the picture. It was the best drip irrigation picture I could find. So we're going to imagine that's the berm and not inside our rain garden. But drip irrigating both inside the rain garden as well as in the berm is really good. Your rain garden will hold water a little bit longer than other ones, but we have a very long dry season here, so it's gonna need some irrigation, especially when the plants are getting established. Your native plants, once they're fully established, will need far less water than you think, and they will be happy and healthy. Make sure you're weeding your garden as needed, just like you would with any garden. Make sure they're looking healthy, get rid of the weeds. And if you're noticing that something looks like it's just not handling the ponding or the sitting in water well, move it. You can dig it up, move it over to your berm. And if something looks like it's too dry, you can add a little more irrigation to it. We talked a little bit about using mulch instead of cobbles in our rain garden. So if you do use mulch, you always want it to be 2 to 3 inches thick. That's also going to help retain the moisture in the garden. You want to use a hardwood mulch. You really don't want like a microbark. You want something that's not going to want to float away, something that's a little bit bigger or a little less likely to disappear if you do overflow your garden. But mulch is also going to break down over time, so just be prepared to refresh it. In my garden, in my front yard, I refresh it once a year, just a little bit. I add like 1/2 inch thick, like one thin layer once a year, and that's all I need to do. But I have friends that do it every 3 years, and they get in there and they add an extra 2 inches, so they wait till it gets really thin. I like to keep it pretty thick continuously. You want to repair areas of erosion. So stabilizing the eroding soil with you can use cobbles. I really like using the big cobbles, the big river rocks to do it. Some people use a splash block, sometimes right below your downspout where it's coming out, or right where your downspout's connecting to your rain garden. Having something there that's going to keep it from creating a big depression. You want to avoid synthetic fertilizers or herbicides in your garden. Try to keep the water as pure as possible. And you want to check for and mitigate extended ponding. So these rain gardens really should not be holding the water for more than 2 to 3 days. If you do have more flooding than that, the plants aren't going to like it. You may get mosquitoes or other pests. So you really do want to try to mitigate any extended ponding. But if your garden is appropriately sized, with what we talked about earlier, this should not be an issue. You should have a way for it to overflow. It should be able to drain nicely. This is where your soil test comes in really handy before you do an installation. So I'm going to go ahead and take questions now. And we have a couple of resources there. I'm going to put this back on the rebate page.
Great.
So
Chris,
that you can do that.
we have a
And
question.
then,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to remind people that there is Hopkins tennis courts in Mitchell Park. There's free mulch pickup, and there's always compost giveaways near Eleanor Party Community Center. And you can find more information at the Water Smart online portal. But definitely take advantage of the free compost and free mulch when you are doing your rain gardens. The mulch is just really key to helping keep that nice and healthy.
Great. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. We have a question about redwood trees. Can ferns, they live in a very shaded area, can ferns be placed in a rain garden?
So ferns generally like to be a little bit more wet all year, and the rain gardens are going to be pretty dry for most of the year. I would, again, really focus on taking a look at that Bosqua website with the plant list. and they will help you very adequately identify which plants are going to be good in a rain garden. Their plant list lists hundreds of plants. Not all of them are good for rain garden, but they have a tab on there that you can sort by that is specific to rain gardens. So sort by rain gardens and take a look there and focus on getting native plants to your area. And I don't have good advice about the ferns because I don't know of any native ferns, and I'm not sure about if they would grow well under a redwood tree, but the ferns that I grew up with would not be happy in a rain garden because it's dry too much of the year. They are designed to drain, so they are not a pond feature. They are what we call temporary ponding, where they'll pond for 1 to 2 days and then they dry out fully because we have this drainage set up so efficiently.
Feel free to put more questions in the Q&A or raise your hand if you want me to unmute you and you can ask Chris your question directly. I did see a question come in that Pam responded to about landscape designers, and I can put the link to that Rescape qualified directory as a good resource of who to work with. So I'll put that in the chat to everyone as well.
And I would say, yeah, as far as local landscape designers, definitely use the rebate guidelines and decide. Sorry, it's not going. There we go. Use the rebate guidelines, and there are more on the Palo Alto website. I just picked the ones that are kind of the big ticket items. Use that when you're designing it and really look at each house. It's great if you're able to get from the homeowner, if you're able to get a video of what their downspouts are doing during a storm. You know, are the downspouts that are traditionally flooding, or if you visit their house in the dry season, you may notice that under some downspouts, there is just area where it's washed out because the water's been hitting so hard. Being able to help them mitigate those issues and get that water moved farther away from the house is always going to be beneficial, but each house is going to be a completely unique design for your rain garden because you're going to have different soil and different setups for where that garden can go in relation to the house. So be sure to do your soil checks and learn about each house individually.
I see a note here saying another good resource is calscape.org to see California native plants and that there are native ferns. So thank you for that. We have a question about, do you have to install any specific length of downspout or the standard one okay?
So that's a great question. It's not the downspout so much as connecting the bottom of the downspout to your garden. Let me go back to this one. So as you can see in this picture, the downspout ends here, but the garden is 10 feet away. So creating something to guide the water there is great. And there's different ways you can do that. You can bury a line. I don't have a picture here, but if you happen to go to Gamble Gardens in Palo Alto, they have a 265-gallon slimline green rain barrel that is set up over by their bike parking by the small parking lot. And the overflow from that barrel is actually buried 10 feet away to go a little more than 10 feet away from the building and comes out kind of at this level here on the map. It's kind of a weird drawing, but comes out kind of in the rain garden in the cobbles to feed that rain garden. So there are ways you can bury the line, but you can also go on top. So let me see what my pictures are here. Sorry, I'm gonna go back. So kind of in this drawing, you can see creating a cobble lined route to get to the let me see if I can just clear everything. Okay, so this creates, I'm gonna read you the a cobble lined route that is not fully dug out that leads to the fully dug out ponding area. So it creates an area that won't erode as the water runs in. So there are different ways to do that. You can run a pipe, or you can do it in a more natural dry creek bed style. This picture here, you can see the water is coming out of a rain barrel. It's coming down the side of the tank. It's actually buried from here into the garden for that little section, but it's only about 3 inches under the soil. So it's just buried enough to protect the pipe and to come nicely into the garden. In this one, we're not connecting to a house, so it's just the water coming straight off of the thing. In this Hoover Park one, you can't see it, but off to the left, it is coming from rain barrels off the bathroom, and it is a buried pipe bringing the water out to the garden. So my example is kind of split at 50-50 between a natural landscaped or a buried pipe.
I see we have a couple questions about construction standards for new development. Pam, do you want to chime in on that? If there's anything about having to install rain gardens for new homes and other new developments?
Sure. There are regulatory requirements Bay Area wide that require installation of stormwater treatment, not necessarily with rain gardens, but it could be with a variety of ways to capture stormwater on site and not let it leave your property. Starting actually July 1st, the new requirements Bay Area wide will be requiring all projects other than single family homes to have stormwater treatment if they're have impervious surface that is 5,000 square feet in total, or larger if they're either putting in a new home or building or driveway. You add up all that impervious surface, and if it's at least 5,000 square foot or more, then they'll be required to put in stormwater treatment. For single family homes, it's a little bit different. It's a 10,000 square foot threshold instead of a 5,000 square foot threshold. But the single family homes do need to do something to manage their stormwater on site, at least in their front yard. They're just not, it just doesn't have to be specially engineered stormwater treatment. But we don't have any requirements for anything smaller than that at this point.
Thank you, Pam. I see we still have people online, so please feel free to put in some more questions or raise your hand. We'll be on for another 10-15 minutes or so. We want to answer your questions. I guess while we wait for questions, Chris, do you have any great success stories of rain gardens with this past busy rain season that we had?
I think the ones that I have in the slideshow are really great examples. The one along the bike path at Bull Park, especially. Sorry, I'm going to flip through really fast. I can go back to that slide. That one has been really amazing because traditionally that bike path has flooded every single winter. We installed this one, I should know this, I think in 2018, and the bike path has not flooded since we installed it. So the city came out and actually used a backhoe to dig us a really long area all the way out like this along here. So that, and then we graded the natural soil so that the water would want to flow down into our creek bed, and then we filled with the drainage rock and the bioswale soil and the cobbles to bring it back up to level, almost level with the bike path, so that if someone was, say, on a bike trying to dodge someone running with a stroller, they could, you know, swerve into the mulch and still be in control. So this whole area in between our deep area and the bike path is all mulch that's at a level with the bike path, but it creates underneath that mulch, it creates a slope to bring the water away from the bike path. So I think that was a really big success. And if you look in the bottom of that picture, you can see down here the drainage grate. So we do have overflow that if that rain garden overflows, it will go into the storm drain again. Previously, all of the flooded area would go into the storm drain. That overflow was impacted with dirt. It was not functioning. I've gone a couple times when it's been raining and I've seen no water flowing down there because it's all able to soak in now.
Great. I see a question about sizing rain gardens. Is it better to have smaller rain gardens around the property or one large one?
So it's really a personal preference. I don't know as far as the rebate, I think Linda, can you answer if that's affecting the rebate at all?
Pam, you want to chime in on that one?
No, it doesn't. If it's up to $600 per rain garden. So if you wanted to install 2, you could receive a rebate for each of them.
Okay, great. So I think it's really a preference based on the property. Because you are having to excavate to put in a rain garden, you may not have significant space in certain areas on your property to do that and be 10 feet away from the house and 5 feet away from the property line. My property, the only place that I am able to do that is in my front yard. My sides of the house are too close to the property line to be able to install anything. So it really is just affected by what the property looks like and how you're able to manage within your own property, and it's a lot of personal preference. You may find that a lot of water comes out of one downspout and not other downspouts, so it is great to target the downspouts that have the highest flow if possible. The spreadsheet for native plants for your rain gardens is on the Bosco website. Let me see if I can pull that up and put it in the chat for you. Okay, I'm gonna put this in the chat. And that is going to open as a Excel spreadsheet. So it'll probably start to download immediately. There isn't like a link to a website. It is an Excel spreadsheet.
And I can include that link in our follow-up email as well. We have a question from Rachel about community projects for volunteering to install a rain garden.
Absolutely. In fact, the Bull Park installation was a community program for the city of Palo Alto, led by Grassroots Ecology, and I consulted on it with them. But we installed that with a group of volunteers. And there are other ones throughout the year. There aren't any scheduled right now, but we do have a bunch coming up, possibly in the fall. I believe the city of East Palo Alto is going to be doing some in the fall. And we just did a big garden installation in East Palo Alto about a month and a half ago. So they do come up usually in October, November, and then again in March and April. So keep your eyes out on the Bosco website, on the City of Palo Alto website, and you can also check the Flows Today website to see if they are hosting any live ones.
I don't see any other questions, but we'll wait a little bit while. So you guys feel free to put some more questions into the Q&A or raise your hand.
Linda, is there a link on the City of Palo Alto website to landscape designers that can help folks install these? I believe there is one on Flows today as well as on the Bosqua, that may be able to help if you're searching.
Yeah, I see that we have the Rescape link on our website.
Oh, perfect. That's a great link. And then Graywater Action is another great local nonprofit that will help with stuff. And we had talked a little bit about the laundry to landscape rebates, and they're a great resource to reach out to for that as well.
Yes, for sure. And I know Valley Water has a list of landscape designers that have worked on rebate programs as well. So we share out that list too.
And for any of you guys that are looking for information, if you search Rain Garden Rebate Palo Alto, you're going to get a lot of these links very quickly as well. But Linda's going to put them in a neat organized list for you to be able to go through in a follow-up email. Graywater Action. Let me put that in the chat. Let me pull up their website. There's two questions here. Sorry, I should have said that first for the name that I just mentioned. Let's make sure I'm in the right one.
I just want to thank everyone again for coming and being patient with us as we had to resend the Zoom link email. Apologize in the delay of that, but really excited that you were able to come and attend this class. And it is recorded, so we will send out the recording as well.
All right, sorry, I was just double checking that I had the right one because sometimes when I search, I end up in a different state, but it is just graywateraction.org. And I'm going to put that in the chat for you as well. And they do have links about doing rain gardens, rain barrels, as well as the laundry to landscape and more sophisticated gray water systems. And they've worked with Valley Water before, so I think there are some collaborations between Valley Water and them for educational programs.
Great. Any other questions for Chris? I don't see any additional questions, but Chris, if it's okay with you, we can share your contact information as well if questions arise.
Yeah, absolutely. Please feel free to share my email in the follow-up.
Great. Well, thank you everyone again for joining us tonight, and have a great 4th of July weekend. And I hope to see you at our open house.
Thank you, Linda and Pam, for putting this all together.
Y'all have a good night.